everybody. Welcome to the virtual launch party for the Someone Like Me podcast. It's a new show from End Slavery, Tennessee, based here in Nashville. We had every intention of doing this as a live event and coming together and meeting each other face to face. But you know what? We're in a season right now where it's important to stay home. And that's what we need to be doing. So we're for technology that allows us to meet virtually, and we're so excited to have you here with us for this little launch party. We want to start by thanking the sponsor for this podcast, the Jones Legacy Group, who is allowing survivors to tell their stories and allowing us to educate the listening audience. So thank you to the Jones Legacy Group for that. We'll have a chance to introduce each of ourselves in greater detail as the stream goes along, but I want to real quick just share who you're seeing on your screen. My name is Leslie Eiler Thompson. I have the profound privilege of hosting this show and facilitating conversation with survivors. We have Derri Smith, who is the founder and executive producer of this podcast, founder of End Slavery Tennessee, and executive producer of this podcast, Margie Quin, who is CEO of End Slavery Tennessee, and then Gregory Byerline, who is producer, editor, and the brains behind this whole project. So Gregory, Margie, Derri, so glad you're here. So as we do this stream, we're going to share more about our stories, the heart behind the project, but we're also going to have an opportunity to answer questions from you who are listening. So if you have any, whether it's for the team, for End Slavery Tennessee, about human trafficking, any of that, please leave them in the comments section below as we go along, and then we'll get to a point where we're able to answer those questions. Before we move on, I do want to offer a disclaimer and a content trigger warning for people who may have children listening or for those who have experienced trauma. There are a couple clips that might be a little uncomfortable, so as those come up, I'll be sure to let you know. So we want to start by playing a clip from an episode with survivor Stephanie, who was the first person we got to talk to, and her episode is out now on all platforms. What Stephanie mentions in this clip and why we wanted to play it first is it's the sort of question that sparked the whole show. And it's really the impetus for our ongoing exploration into the truth of human trafficking. So let's play this first clip.
People don't just decide, hey, I want to be out here, smoking crack, selling my body, and giving my money up just because that's something cool to do. There's an issue in there.
There are a number of questions that kind of have brought this show along and have made us realize maybe we should do a podcast to really explore this. And so Gregory is where it all started. So I'm going to hand it off to him to share a little bit more about himself and then the show as a whole. Gregory?
Thank you, Leslie. The idea for this podcast came a little over a year ago, early 2019, nearing the end of the first season of one of my own shows. And my podcast is all about telling other people's stories, biographies, if you will. But what I wanted to do was go even a little deeper and tell some stories that would ding the universe a little more deeply and make the world a better place for my children and for everyone who's affected by what's happening in our world. So, and I had known about Derri and her work through End Slavery Tennessee through our shared faith community, but I'd never had a chance to meet her. But a friend of mine knows her very well, and I did some networking, and he connected the two of us, and we sat down together, pitched the idea, and it was the right time to do it. And we're so glad that Derri caught the vision and decided to run with it. Leslie and I met at a podcasters conference. Little did we know that our respective shows started like 3 days different from each other. And subsequently, our first seasons kind of ended about the same time. So it was really interesting. But she and I met again on a Sunday morning. So I invited to coffee, kind of started sharing what the idea for this show was. And a few minutes into that conversation, she was like, oh, hold on, I think I see where this is going. And just tell me where you want me to be. And I'm in. So just like that, we had a host for this show. Who I'm hoping to reach is people who are interested in the work of End Slavery Tennessee, like you who are now listening. But I also want to reach men. because men can be part of the solution and not just part of the problem that we'll be discussing in these episodes. This particular podcast is very important, and it's different because the survivors bring their direct experience, and that carries an enormous weight. They have that insider's perspective that only an insider can give. And through the practicality of a podcast, you can listen to it on a walk or in your car, in your office, or anywhere with a mobile device. They're super shareable. And a bonus that we're doing is that full transcripts are available on our website for our friends who are hearing impaired. So they'll be able to read the entire conversation also. So we want to take everything we can do to get these stories out. And I'm happy to be a part of it. So right now I'm going to toss to Derri.
All right. Well, I am an avid podcast listener. So when Gregory came to me with this idea, I was all ears. And I could see right away that there were some big advantages to this format. Years back when I was still CEO, I made an agency-wide policy that we would not grant interviews to the survivors we serve because I could see that those interviews were re-traumatizing. And I also disliked the lack of control that the survivor had about what was actually aired. A lot of times that was just a titillating soundbite. And then if their face was shown, or even if it was just a silhouette, they could be identified often. And that had so many long-term consequences. Suppose their child, all the children at that child's school heard about the mother's history. Now that child had to deal with all of that. If an employer heard, present or future, it might stigmatize the person, just in their mind as a former prostitute. And even if they decided later in their healing journey that they didn't really want their experiences to be public knowledge, it was too late because when something's out on the media, you can't retract it. So a podcast just solved so many complications. And then for us who are members of our communities and for change makers like legislators or people running service organizations, if we want to be successful in addressing this issue, we've got to have a true, deep, accurate understanding. And then what if somebody is listening, a potential victim, and they're still in that honeymoon stage of being groomed? If they listen to these stories, they might get a picture of what's going to happen next. And we just might prevent somebody from being trafficked to begin with. I think what might be most important to me is that when you choose to listen to these podcasts, you empower survivors to use their voice, to tell what's important to them, and instead of having a third party speaking up for them. And I think we're on the right track because after we did the interview with Stephanie, she went on and on about how empowered she felt. And that's what we're all going for. That's exactly what we want. Now, if some of you are wondering what someone like me means, I hope you will listen to our little teaser intro that'll answer that question for you. And please remember how important it is that you listen and that you share this with other people, because otherwise the stories that are being told, it's as if they weren't told to begin with. Thank you. And now I'm going to pass this on to Leslie, who will tell us a little bit about the process of making the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Derri. The process is actually so ingrained to the telling of the story. One of the great things I've learned from Derri as she's kind of shepherded us along in this process is the ways in which In Slavery, Tennessee works to rehabilitate the people that it serves. Even things down to choice. When you're in a lifestyle of human trafficking, your choice is being taken away because there's manipulation that's happening. And so we actually want to provide decision making for our interviewees when they come into the room and provide a comfortable space for them to tell their story. When we're done, we send the clip, the whole conversation, raw, unedited, to the survivors so they can listen through again. Any one of us, doesn't matter who you are, if you talk for an hour, you're going to say something you'd probably like to not have put out into the world. And so it's really important to us that they hear it first and they have the first opportunity to take some things out. And that just provides more decision-making opportunities for them, but it also makes sure they're comfortable. There were several times, I mean, anybody with a microphone in their face gets a little uncomfortable. And there were several moments where they shared with us, they went to one of the questions, but then there was a new question and they're in front of a bunch of people. And so, Derri, to your point, it's so important to provide a space where they're comfortable and they know that their story can be told in a way that they see fit and that is important for them. When we release these episodes, we'll be releasing a combination of survivor stories where we're interviewing with a survivor, but then also we'll share some myth busting episodes so that then we can go in and break down some things so that we, the listening audience, can learn some nuts and bolts so that we can begin to make a change. And so on that note, I'd like Margie, the CEO of End Slavery Tennessee, to talk for a moment about the organization, how it came to be, and the work that they're doing. So go ahead, Margie.
Thanks, Leslie. Gosh, it's great to have you guys listening, and we welcome you to this live launch. Obviously, we would have preferred to do this maybe in person and through some different events, but this is a digital initiative. This is a really innovative and digital initiative. By the grace of God, the timing of it is really good for all of us right now. What I hope you get from these episodes is the message of hope. And so, and I think we can all use a little dose of that right now. End Slavery Tennessee has been around. Derri founded the organization a number of years ago, 10, 12 years ago, kind of out of the trunk of her car. I met Derri about 9-ish, 10-ish years ago when I was an assistant special agent in charge at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. I was working on missing children and trafficking in the Amber Alert program. She was just getting started with End Slavery Tennessee, and we I think, instantly bonded. And I learned so much from her, and we learned together through the process of sort of ramping up here in Tennessee what our response was going to be to this issue. So I think the innovation of this particular initiative is really important. It's important that survivors are telling their truth in their way. In the industry, we have what's called survivor informed or survivor led. And what that really means to us is that we are taking into consideration the things that survivors have to say about their healing journey. So we're doing a check all the time on whether or not the programs that we're offering and the paths that we're taking these survivors down to heal is what's right for them. And so this is a really sort of public way to get that feedback, to hear from survivors, not only what their journey was in trafficking, but after trafficking. I think is really important for us as a society, as an industry, as caregivers, as an agency. And so this came along at such a great time, I think, in our evolution at End Slavery Tennessee. And so I will watch and listen and maybe participate just a little bit along the way to this podcast. And I hope that you guys will tune in. I think it's gonna be a fantastic initiative for us. Leslie?
Thank you, Margie. Appreciate that. We're going to go into playing a couple clips before we open up for a time of Q&A. So again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments now as we move along. And if we have so many that we can't get to them here, what we'll do is we'll just continue this stream if you want to stick around, and we'll answer more questions at the end. So the first show clip is from an episode with Rue. And if you have children in the room, or if you have an experience with trauma, this might not be a good clip for you to listen to. So part of Rue's story is that her husband was actually her trafficker for a time. And so this clip shares an experience that she had that actually involved her son. So let's play this clip.
Until my son and I grew to trust him And one day, as my son's father I was chained to the bed and he was doing his thing, but I started screaming because he did something new, and it startled my son. And my son knew, he knew something was wrong. And so he stormed out the door, ran down to this other guy's house, started pounding on the door and said, "He's killing my mommy. He's killing my mommy."
After this episode and conversation, and once we got the first round approved by the survivor, Gregory and I kind of talked about this episode in particular. Gregory, what were your takeaways from this conversation with Rue?
This entire episode, it just wrecked me. And when she got to this part about her 5-year-old son, I remembered back when I was 5. I didn't experience this, but I remember being a 5-year-old boy. I have memories. It's a kindergarten age boy. He's going to have that memory and that element of trauma that he carries around also. So this is now a 2-generational thing. And I just, it's stories like this that, again, I said earlier, that kind of move us toward becoming a part of the solution instead of continuing the problem.
Yeah, and I think what's also really important is, Margie, you touched on this, the hope that these survivors bring. We all have hopes, dreams, goals, and these women are no different. And so Rue's episode in particular, I won't share spoilers. When it drops, you got to watch it. But what she's doing now, what she hopes to accomplish, is just an incredible testament to the fact that there is life after this. People can be rehabilitated. People can move on. And so Rue's story is one of hope. All of their stories are stories of hope. That's part of this whole thing, is we want to share that there is hope. And so it's not all, I mean, the stories are not for the faint of heart. These episodes are not easy to listen to, but by the end of them, you will walk away with a sense of hope. It's our expectation that that is true. So the next clip is also from a conversation with Rue. And one of the ways we can begin to make an impact is to ask survivors, like Margie said, survivor informed, what should change. So here's Rue sharing what she wished people knew about human trafficking.
The biggest thing I would really, really, with all my heart, wish people would do is realize that you don't know somebody's story and you don't know anything about them until you sit down and stop judging them and you listen to them.
That's a really wonderful bit of wisdom, no matter what, huh? Rue's talking about this in context. Actually, she was in a situation where she overheard people talking about human trafficking, and just about everything they said was incorrect. There's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of things that are not true. There's a lot of things that maybe just aren't being talked about. And so it's our hope that by having this podcast, we can actually talk about the truth and bring some things to light. So I want to transition now to a time of question and answer. So if you have questions and you haven't asked them yet, go ahead and do that. We have some pre-submitted questions that we'll start with to get things kicked off. And I'd like to start with Derri. One of the main questions that we are often being asked is prostitution, human trafficking. What's the difference? Where's the line? Can you talk to that?
Sure. When you listen to Stephanie, you'll note that she uses street terms like prostitute, hoe, pimp, and that's because typically trafficking victims don't recognize themselves as trafficking victims when they come to us. That takes time. I think the easiest way to explain sex trafficking, differentiated from other issues, is this. If you have sex, and it's in exchange for something of value, money, drugs, whatever, and that's all there is to the picture, you have prostitution. If you have sex that's forced, you have rape. But for someone 18 and over, all three need to be present for it to be human trafficking. Someone 18 and over, there's sex in exchange for something of value, and force, fraud, or coercion is involved. Now, it's very different if it's a minor and someone under the age of 18, then force, fraud, and coercion do not need to be present. Children are not equipped to make those kinds of choices. If a 12-year-old thinks it's a great idea to have sex with 7 men a day and give her money to somebody, you know that somebody's manipulating and exploiting that child. So any child, any minor, anyone under 18 who is used for commercial sex, sex in exchange for anything of value, that can be money, drugs, a sandwich, a place to stay, whatever, that is a human trafficking victim as well.
Okay.
And I think that there are other kinds of trafficking, labor trafficking, for example, and I'd like to turn this over to Margie. I have a feeling she might have some things to add, both in the way of definition and expounding on the question.
Thanks, Derri. Yeah, labor trafficking looks a little bit different. It is still the exploitation of somebody, but it is for work, not sex. And so if you have somebody who is performing work, they are separated from their papers, they are not being compensated for the work that they're doing. Many foreign nationals who are being labor trafficked in our country, again, will be separated from any of their paperwork, may not know where they are forced to live, on the property or where they're working, are not compensated for the work that they're doing, and typically there's some sort of threat, so a threat of violence, a threat of intimidation. I'll tell the authorities, especially for those who are undocumented. So labor is an exploitation of some sort of work. And we are also serving labor trafficking survivors at End Slavery Tennessee. That is not the majority. The majority are sex trafficking survivors, but we are serving labor trafficking, both adults and minors, through End Slavery Tennessee's programs.
Thank you. So, Margie, one of the big questions is we talk a lot about women. We have a lot of women survivors. About are most of these victims women? What do we know about men in human trafficking and boys and it's not just girls and women, right?
Yeah, great question. The numerical or the data or statistics on the number of boys and men who are being trafficked is a little dicey. We're just not sure. The national numbers look about 15%. Some say as high as 20-25%. We know that boys are being trafficked in the state of Tennessee and right here in Middle Tennessee because we have them on our caseloads. They're coming to us for services. The youngest boy in service in 2019 was 12. So we know that young boys are being exploited. And to Gregory's point earlier in this broadcast, men are typically the perpetrators of young boys as well. So, when we talk about men being the solution, which I love Gregory's line on that, that is absolutely the case. And that applies to both boys and men who are being trafficked as well as women and young girls.
And actually talk about children, boys, girls. What is the truth? What is the situation with that?
Right. So children are extremely vulnerable, and we could have a whole podcast just on the things that are making children super vulnerable. We saw the numbers almost double between 2018 and 2019. So we had 66 referrals of minors just in 2019, and that's just Middle Tennessee. Some of that has come about as a result of a new policy by the Department of Children's Services that requires all caseworkers, case managers, child protective services to contact End Slavery Tennessee when a victim presents themselves. We have some new relationships going forward with the Davidson County Juvenile Court, with Epic Girl, which is a program that's run out of the Davidson County Juvenile Court. And they are going to begin to refer to us in 2020. So we know that those juvenile numbers are going to climb in 2020.
Wow. Thank you for that. Do we have any user submitted questions? We have someone behind the scenes who's checking all of this. And so if we do, now's a good time. Okay, so Lacey asks, I'd love to know key things to look for to be able to help those who are stuck and can't say anything. I know so often these situations are happening right in front of us, but people have a blind eye to all the red flags. Yes, thank you, Lacey. Derri, you want to speak to this?
That's a great question and something that everybody needs to be aware of. Law enforcement can't be everywhere. We've got to have eyes open. And I think the best answer to that, because the list is rather long, is to direct you to our website at endslaverytn.org. You'll see there a link for red flags, and it has a rather comprehensive list of things that are specific to minors as opposed to adults or foreign nationals. So just really look at that and share that information. And also program the hotline number for Tennessee into your telephone. So if you see something dicey, you know what to do right away. I will say that people often, just because things are on that red flag list doesn't mean human trafficking is going on. But if you see something that just doesn't seem right to you, trust your gut. And then you see that maybe some of the things on that list are happening as well. It's better to be safe than sorry. The people at the hotline would rather you call and be wrong than not call and be right.
That's great. Thank you, Derri. Any other questions? Linda asks, I want to know how I can help. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Linda. Huge importance. Margie, how can people like Linda help?
Again, I'm going to direct you to our website at endslaverytn.org. There's at the top, you'll see a number of different buttons or drop downs that you can click on. Click on the one that says Take Action. And you will see in there a list of things that you can do, everything from volunteering, purchasing things off our wish list, becoming a member of Hands of Hope, which is a monthly donation that you can set up for as little as $5 a month. We love that stability of sort of a consistent, giver or person sort of in our lives at End Slavery Tennessee. So on that website at endslaverytn.org, again, click on the Take Action. You can sign up for the newsletter, which will give you sort of an in-depth look at kind of what we're doing every month, survivor stories, celebrations that we're having. We're writing a blog a couple of times a month, so you'll see what we're blogging about. And you can find all that you need to do, volunteering or donating your time, your professional expertise, or your money, on that website. Thanks.
Thanks. So I know we have a number of other questions, but I want to be respectful of our time. So we're going to move on, play a couple more clips, and if at the end we have some questions, we can get to those at the very end. So this next clip speaks to the educational element of this show. It's a conversation with Joan, which actually brought on the topic of red flags. And I'm so glad Lacey asked that, because we were going to make sure you knew that exhaustive list, maybe not exhaustive, but a pretty comprehensive list of red flags is available at endslaverytn.org. So this is Derri in the conversation with Joan, the survivor, talking about some things that we can be looking for and questions we need to be asking for children. So let's play that clip.
As a culture, we tend to blame the victim and to stop and think, how did this 12-year-old get pregnant?
Yes.
Somebody's abusing, manipulating this child. That's the way we have to learn to think.
Yes.
Yeah, and what I'm learning as I sit in the room with these survivors is that there are some common threads in their tapestries of things like lots of school being missed, maybe running away from home. There are a lot of sort of red flags that we can begin to see if we start looking for them. So Margie, next we were going to have you talk about how people can get involved, but Linda got us going early on that. So just remind people what button it is on the End Slavery Tennessee website.
Yeah, click on the Take Action button. I'm just noticing a question from Haley about, what do we recommend as far as reading to learn more about human trafficking? Are there any things that we recommend? That's a great question. And in my next blog, I'll put some stuff up that I think is a really good read. I would probably start with our blogs. There are some great informative reports and blogs out there. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation has a number of great reports, statistical reports, and that I actually participated in writing and researching when I was with the TBI. They have a great outreach website called ithastostop.com. You can also link to that from our website at endslaverytn.org. So there are some great things out there and great places you can go to learn more, and I appreciate that question. And we'll get those links and reports to you. It's a great thing to do while you're staying safe at home.
Well, on that note, I actually want to play one final clip, and this is for Margie, Derri, anyone who has spent time or money working to do their part to end trafficking in the United States. This is Joan with a little message for you. So let's play the last clip.
I just want to say thank you to End Slavery. I couldn't have made it this far without this great organization. They have been there from day one, and it's not even feel like an organization, it's more like a family. They helped me get my voice back. They helped me do so much that I just couldn't even think that I would have done had it not been for End Slavery.
That is awesome. So thank you to Margie, Derri, Gregory, anybody who has spent their time, their money, their efforts to make a change for future generations. As you listen to these episodes, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to ask them on our website at endslaverytn.org. We hope to do more of these. We have every intention and hopes and plans to do live events once we're all safe from COVID, but right now this works pretty well, I think. So we hope to do more of these. And so feel free to ask us questions. I think we will stay over just a little bit after the outro song for more questions if you have them. So keep asking them. The first 2 episodes are here now on all podcasting platforms. So go listen to Stephanie's story now that you have an idea of what this is all about. I'm so excited for you to hear her story. And then the forthcoming episodes are so great. I want to take a moment to thank some folks. I want to thank the production staff for the podcast, Gregory Byerline, Derri Smith, Kurt Goebel, who did our music that you're going to hear here in a second. Caitlin at End Slavery Tennessee, who's the one behind all of this. So this is her first month in this job, everyone. So it's pretty amazing. She's awesome. And the entire End Slavery Tennessee staff who's working so hard, not only on this project, but across the board with government, law enforcement, to make a change in these survivors' lives. It's so important. And then most of all, the brave survivors who have courageously shared their stories. It is not easy to share some of the hardest moments of our lives. I don't think many of us would do that. And so if you're watching and you are someone who has shared your story with us, thank you. And I genuinely mean that. It has changed me to hear your story, and I'm so grateful for other people to get to hear it as well. So thank you to everyone who has joined us. This has been so fun. After this little 30-second outro, we'll come back for some more questions, so keep asking them. This will be available if you need to leave on our Facebook page, End Slavery TN Facebook page, so it's not going away, so you can come back and watch. So everyone stay safe and be well, and we'll keep talking. Bye. All right, so thank you if you are still with us. We're going to take some more questions, and I think we have one ready to go. Connie Middleton says, I am in the event industry and we travel, or used to, all the time. Do you all ever talk to groups about all of this? With as much travel, I'd love to keep our company in touch with this subject. Connie, thank you. Derri, Margie, one of you want to take that?
I turn it to Margie. I'll just say, yes, absolutely. We train all sorts of people all the time, thousands. So I'll let Margie take this one.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this. We do some in-person training. We also have a great online training platform. While with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, I oversaw the training of all law enforcement in the state of Tennessee, as well as supervised the first ever statewide human trafficking investigative and enforcement unit. And so when I moved over to End Slavery Tennessee last June, one of the first things that came down the pike was this request from the State Department of Education. Mary Littleton, the representative out of Dixon, passed a piece of legislation in 2019 that required all public school educators in the state of Tennessee to get trained on identification, detection, and prevention of human trafficking. Tremendous piece of legislation. And so in July of last year, the Department of Ed, the State Department of Ed called us and said, hey, we want you to roll out that training. And we need it to be up by October 1st, which was a pretty heavy lift for us. But we relied on some great friends over at Think Through to help us develop this online training. So if you go on our website at endslaverytn.org and you click on the tab that says Learning Center, you will see all of our online training classes. And the one that's up for all public school educators in the state of Tennessee, there's about a 40-minute runtime on that. Will really give you the basics, the 101, the ins and outs, what you need to know about trafficking, to educate yourself. There's a small module in there that is very specific to teachers and the ways in which they are required to report because of state law. They are required to do some extra things and some different things with regards to reporting. So there's a small module in there on that, but the rest of it is really just your 101, your basic stuff, and anybody can take that training. I think we've had over 13,000 teachers and individuals take that training class since October 1st of 2019. That's a lot of folks through that training platform. We also were required by that legislation, and the Department of Ed asked us to develop training for K through 12. So what we did with K through 4, we recommend that you use the NCMEC education library. So NCMEC it's an acronym, and it stands for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They are the be-all, end-all with regards to child exploitation issues. A lot of the numbers and the data that we talk about comes from NCMEC. And we utilize their library for that K through 4. We also stood up 2 separate modules, one for tweens and one for teens. And we partnered with NCMEC again to embed some of their training videos into those modules. They were supposed to be delivered in all public schools via their health classes, children's health classes. So it's facilitated by a teacher. So while you're home with your kids, and we've got millions of kids at home right now, obviously, my middle schooler is in the next room doing her online classes. You as a parent can facilitate some of that training. NCMEC is going to do the hard stuff. They're going to be the ones to talk about the stuff that you don't want to talk about with your kids. And so sort of stepping them through that tweens or teens training would be a great thing to do during this sort of staying at home time. It's a great sort of age appropriate messaging and language that are embedded in those training modules. And you can find that on our website, and it's free. So those are great questions.
Thanks, Margie. On that note, I think we had a great question. Are victims more vulnerable during this social distancing and stay-at-home suggestions and orders? So what can we do to be more aware of to help, especially with school out? Derri, you want to answer that?
And then Margie can.
Yeah, you two just.
We'll bounce off of each other. But I think there are 2 ways in which there is extra risk right now. We've probably read about the increase in domestic violence. When people are shut together with their exploiter, the violence increases. And the same is certainly true of human trafficking survivors. We've even seen briefly today that husbands can actually be the traffickers. There's an intersect with domestic violence and intimate partner violence and human trafficking. And then, as Margie alluded to, we have so many children at home right now on the computer. And the great majority, I think it's about 76% of initial contact with children by traffickers is online. So that means we have a lot of children very vulnerable right now. It's a time to be paying attention as parents, and it's a time to be, as Margie said, doing some training. Margie?
Yeah, so the TBI actually put out a great video about what they're seeing, their Internet Crimes Against Children's unit. And it's on YouTube. We have posted about it, posted the links to that video. If you're looking at our socials, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, stay connected with us. Anything that comes out like that, we're going to post about and comment on and talk about how it impacts the population that we're serving. So TBI put out a great video on that. What they're seeing is in the last week, more than double the number of NCMEC cyber tips are coming into law enforcement. So cyber tips come into NCMEC and then they're filtered down to the appropriate investigative law enforcement agencies. And so TBI has seen a 100% increase in the number of cyber tips that they're dealing with. And as Derri said, we've got millions and millions of kids at home. Exploitation is going to be occurring. It is absolutely going to be occurring, and it's going to be increasing. We've got to stay vigilant as parents. If you wouldn't let your child go out and play on I-40, don't go let them play on the internet. It is just as dangerous as going out and playing on I-40 at rush hour. So I think, just being aware of that, keeping an eye on what your kids are doing and what they're watching, they're going to see things that you would prefer they not see if they are unsupervised on the internet. And so we've got to be vigilant when it comes to that.
That's great. Well, I think unless someone has a question, now would be the time to ask it. But I think we have gotten to all the questions, and so grateful for everybody who stuck around and for who tuned in, and Derri and Margie and Gregory. Thank you all. If you have any questions moving forward, use the website enslaverytn.org to ask those, and we'll answer you some way or another, maybe with an email or maybe with one of these. So thank you, everybody. This has been so wonderful. Everybody have a good day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.